I started working on this material partly because I was interested in why people were so inclined to go to any lengths to protect their belief systems. I wanted to understand, and I knew that those were systems of value, right? That a belief system is something that enables you to ascribe value to things so that you can act in the world towards things and away from things, roughly speaking. And I've already made a case to you that belief systems regulate people's emotions, but not as a consequence of decreasing their death anxiety or anything like that, or even directly decreasing their threat sensitivity or uncertainty, but more specifically by helping them orient themselves in the world so that what they do matches what they want in the social environment. And it's an important set of distinctions because the emotional control that belief systems allow is mediated by success in the social environment. That's the crucial thing. It's not directly, it's not as if you're holding a belief system and that's directly inhibiting somehow your emotional responsivity. It's more that you have a mode of orienting yourself in the world so that other people can understand what you're up to, so that you can cooperate and compete with them without conflict. And the fact that you can do that without conflict and maybe even with cooperation, that's what regulates your emotion. So it's not only the fact of the belief system, it's the fact that it's shared with everyone else. And so people are willing to defend their belief systems because they're defending the territorial structure that enables them to make sense of the world and then to act out making sense of the world with everyone else around them. Now then the question arises, what if two different groups of people have different belief systems? What do you do in a situation like that? And one answer is you capitulate. Another answer is that you fight. Another answer might be that you come to some consensus about how the difference between those different belief systems might be mediated so that you can inhabit the same territory without subordination or without conflict. But if you're going to come together in an agreement, you can't do that simply by abandoning the belief system, because the belief system is what orients you in the world. And so the negotiation is very tricky. And because of that, it often ends up in subordination or conflict. Another question that might arise out of that rat's nest of questions is, if you have belief system A and you have belief system B, and they're in conflict, is there any principles that you can use or any guidelines you can use to take the belief systems apart to try to understand what might be of central value in either of them or both, so that if you do bring them together, or even if one supersedes the other, that there's some evidence that they're predicated on principles that are actually viable. And of course that brings up the question of what constitutes viable principles. And I got interested in that more particular question because when the Cold War was raging, there were two ideological systems set up in the world, roughly speaking. There were, of course, more, but we can simplify it for the sake of argument down to two. And one was predicated on the communitarian principles that were put forward by Marx, and the other was a consequence of, I would say, Western individualistic free market capitalist democracies, roughly speaking. And then you might ask yourself, well, was that only a difference of opinion? Right? Because that's the central question. If it's just a difference of opinion, if what's underneath it is arbitrary, then A, it doesn't matter which system wins, roughly speaking. B, there's no right and wrong in the discussion, right? That would be something that would be more akin to a postmodern claim. It's just Group A puts forward their claims to power and Group B puts forward their claims to power, and they're both equally valid and, well, have at her fundamentally, because there's no way of of solving the problem. But it struck me that I didn't think that we should leap to that conclusion so rapidly. And so I started to investigate, I started to investigate the substructure of Western thought, not so much communist thought, because I thought of communism as an interloper on the scene. It was a system that wasn't devised and formalized until the late 1800s, and I didn't see it as part of what you might describe as organic development. There's no mythology, so to speak, at the basis of the communist perspective. And one of the things that's very interesting is that although those ideas were roundly defeated by the end of the 20th century, they're making a comeback so rapidly that it's almost unbelievable. You know, I got an email from a medical student yesterday at the University of Toronto, and now the courses that they have to take, the mandatory, these are social justice courses, include modules on equity, and equity is equality of outcome. They're pushing, people are having the equality of outcome notion pushed on them in mandatory training in universities everywhere again. And equity isn't equality of opportunity, it's equality of outcome. You know, that was the central dictum of the communist states in the 20th century. It's like, what the hell? How did we get back to that again already? So, and the idea being is that if there isn't absolute equality of outcome within an organization, that the thing is corrupt and needs to be restructured from the bottom up. And then the question, of course, is who decides that outcomes are equal by what means and with what groups? Because you can produce an infinite number of groups of people with equally validly in some sense, and you're never going to get equality of outcome across the infinite number of ways that you can parse up society into groups. It's not even technically possible unless everyone has nothing. So anyways, these are obviously very powerful ideas, and the mere fact that they killed 100 million people already or more in the 20th century wasn't enough to put them to rest. Anyway, so back to the main theme. Is there something, this is the main question, is there a set of ideas that Western civilization is predicated on that are more than just bloody opinion? That's the question. Because if there isn't, well then, what do you do about that? It's arbitrary? You're just holding it for no reason whatsoever? It could be a different system. There's no reason to stick with it. All of those things. Like it takes the core out of it. Well, that was Nietzsche's claim, right? He said, you take the core metaphysical presupposition out from underneath Western civilization, or any civilization for that matter, and the whole thing loosens, shakes, and crumbles. Well, for Nietzsche, the metaphysical presupposition was God. Well, and then the question, of course, well, what even does that mean? And on one hand, it means, I suppose, adherence to a dogmatic set of beliefs. But then you might ask yourself, well, is there something else that it means? It means at least the hypothesis of some transcendent value. It means at least